Something has occurred to her, something transparently simple, something she's always known, it seems, but never articulated, which is that the moment of death occurs while we are still alive. Life marches right up to the wall of that final darkness, one extreme state of being butting against the other. From the Stone Diaries by Carol Shields. Not long after the fireworks on the 31st of December 1999, a young woman was admitted with pneumonia. And within days, really, she was with us on ITU, needing renal inotropes, filtering. One night, her airway occluded, and a few of us in the blue light worked attentively around her. She died not long after this, and at the time, I was shocked that a simple chest infection might do this to a fit young mother of three, wired as she was to antibiotics and to so much technology there, right at the start of the new millennium. Weeks later, after my successful application for a registrar post in oncology, one morning at a ward round, a colleague was congratulating me, slapping me on the back, this hench anaesthetist in scrubs. "Brilliant," he said, "brilliant. Oncology, at least you can't mess up in oncology. Everyone's dying anyway." I return to him often over the years in talks like this and memories. My backslapping anaesthetist. I caricature and demonize him, and I wonder about him. His view that, other than prolonging life, medicine has no moral or therapeutic accountability. That this is its one defining, overriding purpose, almost its entirety. But then was I so much better? Some distance into my 20s, 5 years a doctor, 6 years ahead of becoming a father, and still astonished, almost offended by the fragility of life, rendered suddenly, starkly, painfully visible. But of course, for he and I, viewed through medicine's day-to-day business, the truth of this is so often very opaque. Because, in a sense, the backslapping anaesthetist was just plain wrong. Everyone, actually, in this progress-infused world of modern medicine is not just dying anyway. Yes, even within the small pocket of medicine I inhabit as a cancer doctor, remissions increasingly achieved, toxicities abated, molecular targets precisely fixed upon, benefits personalized, hopes realized, lives extended, deaths routinely, astonishingly deferred. Just in my brief quarter century as a doctor, it's palpable, an acceleration of what we can know and do, what is possible and what is achievable. Unthinkable, even 20 years ago, that we'd successfully lock onto cellular targets, say, and suspend the ravages of advanced lung cancer. So the anaesthetist and I were, in our separate and personal and different ways, confounded by this odd convergence. On the one hand, this impressive, extraordinary, wonderful, and rising therapeutic reach and might of medicine. And then on the other hand, the fact that all of us, you and I, sat here, are fragile, materially and animally fragile, breaking flesh, impossibly brief, against a weight of time and world, passing always, incrementally or suddenly, from life to death. Doctors, as John Berger writes, are the living intermediary between us and the multitudinous dead. But this encounter, our positioning here between the two, remains an unsettled one, almost a tussle. When to defer death, by how much, how best, at what cost, whose death, whether ever to hasten it, what the measure is of a good death, what the measure is of so many words here, cure, nihilism, palliation, reversible, hope. The tussle, of course, such as it is with much more than just pathology. It's with what's hoped for, valued, believed in and feared. It's a tussle with meaning, not one that should be readily fixed by a vial of pembrolizumab or a scalpel. But that's exactly, almost routinely, what we reach for. CPR in the dying, chemotherapy in the last months of life, a central line or the CT scan in the last days of it. Why? Well, that, I guess, thankfully, is what we're here to think about, but perhaps truthfully, because the medicalization of death is continuous with the medicalisation of life, and it's hard to recognise when living tips or hastens to dying. But perhaps also truthfully, because we, as agents of medicine, are fearful of our own mortality, of being deemed nihilistic or plain bad at our jobs, or actually, simply, of feeling the deep ache and weight of loss. Perhaps also, surprisingly, because we can act from hubris, laziness, a sheer lack of care, because it's easier, quicker, less sorrowful, more authoritative and true to form to intervene always, almost mechanically, blindly, to prolong life. And because all of us, as a society, in a world where so much can be known or fixed, expect, indeed demand, that all suffering must be tempered and life indefinitely prolonged. Regardless, there are costs to this. Financial ones, yes, but also bad deaths, last weeks and months and years of life empty of living and tethered to hospitals. Truth-telling and autonomy lost to the shiny promises of mighty medicine. The fact of food banks and homelessness as co-present with millions spent on immunotherapy. A planet ebbing alongside and perhaps not entirely unrelated to some or other version of this consumerism. T.S. Eliot in 4 quartets writes, "He who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying, with a little patience." Perhaps we should be careful not to demonize the medicalization of death so much as to wonder about the medicalization of life, the extent of it and the culture of it. Wonder about what we, as humanity, value and wish for. Ask not just how we ought to die, but increasingly, pressingly, how it is that we want to and ought to live. Thank you.